Welcome to Bytterfly Podcast. We're the place where we explore those, insightful transformations happening in the world of work and technology.
That's right.
And today we're doing a deep dive into a really relevant publication, Globalization in Software, comparing onsite, hybrid, and home office by Almir Mamudowski.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece. It really looks at how global software teams organize themselves and collaborate across these different ways of working. Super timely stuff.
Exactly. So our mission here is to pull out the key insights from Almir's work. We're focusing on how these global teams function, the organizational side, the collaboration methods, depending on whether they're fully on-site, hybrid, or entirely working from home.
And the idea is to give you a clear picture of these dynamics without getting bogged down in super technical code detail.
Right. We want the practical takeaways.
Precisely. And it's worth noting, the publication zooms in on Scrum teams in international software development.
Yeah.
It deliberately skips the deep code stuff.
Okay.
Instead, it focuses on application structure, how the work gets organized. And importantly, it tackles the huge impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is just this massive, unprecedented challenge.
And the study itself is based on Almir's actual work experience, right, at a big consulting firm.
Yes, exactly. His time at a multinational consulting firm, working with a major client in the insurance industry, and they were using Scrum as their main framework.
Now, what's really cool is that you actually know Almir.
I do, yes.
So that gives you a bit of an inside track, maybe some extra context on his observations.
Yeah, I think so. Knowing him professionally, I can hopefully, shed some light on some of the nuances behind what he wrote.
Fantastic. Okay, let's set the scene then. Globalized software development, it's a huge field. What got Almir interested? What led to this publication?
Well, you look at his background, it kind of makes sense. He actually started out with web development pretty early on. I think he even built his father's company website way back.
Oh,
Yeah. So that initial exposure to the web and building software sort of planted the seed, I guess. And that path eventually led him to Capgemini Deutschland GmbH. Capgemini. Okay, they're a massive name in IT consulting. What's the context there? Why is that significant?
well, Capgemini is just this huge global player. They operate, everywhere. 5 continents, hundreds of thousands of employees work in over 50 countries.
Wow.
They handle the whole software lifecycle for all sorts of clients. So it's exactly the kind of environment where you'd see these different work models playing out on a global scale. Perfect setting for this kind of study.
In this publication, it focuses on one specific project within Capgemini for an insurance client.
That's right. The case study is centered on a project for a major global insurance company, a really big name.
Okay.
The goal was to build an internal platform for them, basically to optimize their underwriting process for medium to large clients. The ones with complex insurance needs, multiple locations.
Yeah, we're getting the information right and quickly. It's absolutely critical. Timely, accurate information is everything in that sector.
So how did Almir and his colleagues get involved? The text mentions a bid. What does that actually mean in that world?
So in consulting, a bid is basically the proposal you put together to try and win the project from the client.
Right.
It involves presentations, detailed documents outlining your solution, showing you've got the right skills. So back in late 2019, Almir and some colleagues were pulled in to help prepare this bid for the insurance client.
And their specific skills were key.
Yeah, their expertise in the Angular framework was apparently a big factor. That was a core technology the client wanted. And Almir had specific Angular experience from his studies and other work, so he was a really good fit for that bidding team.
Okay, so they put the bid together and they won it.
They did, which then led to this initial plan for an international assignment.
Ah, the Bangkok part. What was the original plan?
The original plan was actually for a 3-month on-site assignment in Bangkok, Thailand. The client really wanted the team there, working directly with them.
3 months is a long time.
It is. And Almir had a pretty major personal thing happening. He and his wife were expecting their first child.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so being away for 3 months would have meant missing that crucial time. So after some discussion, they worked out a modified plan. Almir would go for 4 weeks on-site instead.
That makes sense. Still requires balancing project needs and personal life, which happens a lot in global projects, I imagine.
Absolutely. It's a constant balancing act.
So even 4 weeks internationally involves a ton of logistics. The publication mentions visa issues. What were the hurdles there?
Oh, yeah. Getting a Thai work visa turned out to be way more complicated than just getting a tourist visa.
Right. Different requirements.
Totally. It needed a formal request letter, like signed by the CEO of the client's Thai office, original signatures, official stamps, the works.
Bureaucracy.
Pretty much, even using expedited mail, it added significant time. It really highlights this often underestimated effort involved in global mobility. Companies need really smooth processes for this stuff.
Definitely. Delays can mess up timelines, morale.
Exactly.
And besides the visa, Capgemini had its own internal hoops to jump through. Security, medical stuff.
Well, absolutely. Being a big global firm, they take employee safety really seriously. So there were mandatory online security courses specific to Thailand.
What did those cover?
All sorts of things. General situational awareness, finding emergency exits, the publication even mentions the Halle shooting in Germany to really drive home why that awareness matters.
Wow. Okay. Serious stuff.
Yeah. And also cultural nuances, communication styles, appropriate behavior. Then there was the medical side, company doctors, required vaccinations. Rabies was one example mentioned.
Right.
And on top of all that, internal travel authorization, getting approvals up the management chain. It just shows the layers of planning and risk management involved.
And actually getting to Bangkok and finding a place to stay wasn't straightforward either?
No, not quite just booking a flight. The client's travel department did handle the flights, which helped, but accommodation was on Almir and his colleagues.
Oh.
They got recommendations for hotels near where the client's team was staying, but they had to book it themselves. And airport transfers had specific rules, too. No regular taxis allowed. Had to be pre-booked hotel transport for security.
Ah.
And then, because of availability, they actually had to split their initial stay between two different hotels. Even moving between them, just like a kilometer apart, raised concerns about moving luggage securely.
Sounds stressful before you even start working.
Right. And the travel itself was long flight with a layover in Abu Dhabi, something like 22 hours total. It really paints a picture of the practical hurdles global teams face.
So, okay, Almir finally gets to the office in Bangkok. What was that environment like? The G Tower?
Yeah, the office was in this really impressive building called the G Tower. Apparently, it literally looks like a G from the outside.
Cool.
And it had this kind of unique elevator system. Different elevators went to specific blocks of floors. Makes sense for a 39-story building, I guess.
And the actual work they were doing there on site remind us of the focus.
So the main goal was building that internal platform, streamlining the insurance underwriting for those big, complex clients.
Mm.
And the team, Almir's team, played this really important bridging role.
Bridging.
Between who? Between the developers and the client's management. Partly navigating language differences, but also just translating technical concepts. Being collocated really helped smooth out that communication.
Makes sense. The publication also mentions some initial, maybe cultural friction within the team itself.
Yeah, Almir observed a bit of initial tension. He wondered if it was maybe different work culture perspectives colliding a bit.
How so?
Well, he kind of reflected on maybe a more competitive approach, which he linked to his Balkan background, versus perhaps how his North European and Indian colleagues approached integrating into a new team.
Interesting observation.
But he makes it clear that it was overcome through, small talk, helping each other out, and the fact that they were kind of in it together as the first external contractors on this part.
So that initial awkwardness faded.
Yeah, it sounds like it integrated pretty well. It just highlights how important cultural awareness and consciously building team rapport are, especially in diverse global teams.
And being physically there in Bangkok seems like it was absolutely key to building that trust early on.
Definitely. The publication really stresses that. Being collocated just accelerated the whole integration and trust building process. And their role as sort of mediators, this joker role, feeding back information, that helped too. It shows the power of face-to-face interaction.
Almir also connects some of this to psychology books, How to Win Friends, and Never Split the Difference.
Yeah, it's an interesting reflection he makes. He realized afterwards that simple things he did, like asking colleagues for help setting up his laptop or asking for guidance on the project, actually helped build trust. He links it to Dale Carnegie's idea that asking for help makes the other person feel valued, and principles from Chris Voss's negotiation book about building rapport.
Huh. So applying negotiation tactics subconsciously?
Kind of. He even jokes about maybe being influenced by watching The Mentalist. But the bigger point is how we often use these psychological principles without really thinking about it, and how understanding them can really help team dynamics.
That's fascinating that a lot of intuitive interaction actually has this basis in established principles. Okay, shifting to the technical workflow during that on-site phase, how did they manage the code development?
Pretty standard stuff for collaborative software development, really. They used Git for version control.
Okay. Branches, merges.
Yep, a common branching strategy.
Yep.
Stable code on main branches, new features or fixes on separate branches. Lets multiple people work at once without tripping over each other. They merging changes back in via pull requests, which included a code review step for quality.
Essential for teams.
And Almir points out Git is useful even if you're working alone. Good for tracking changes, backups. They also use tools like Jenkins and Bamboo for continuous deployment.
Automating the release process.
Automating getting code to test environments, yeah. But the final push to the live production environment was still a manual step, involving approvals and, crucially, the testers signing off. A mix of automation and human checks.
And how did the different parts of the application, like front-end and back-end, connect?
They used APIs, application programming interfaces. That's the standard way for software components to talk to each other.
Okay.
And they used tools like Swagger to document and test those APIs so everyone knew how things were supposed to connect. Being in the same place made sorting out any integration issues much easier. Just direct conversation.
Makes sense. And quality control, testing the software.
They had a dedicated testing team. Their job was to really put the features through their paces, test the whole platform end to end.
Okay.
They also did knowledge transfer sessions, KT sessions, basically sharing info and expertise within the team. And during Almir's time there, they started introducing unit tests.
Developer written tests.
Exactly. Small, automated tests for specific bits of code. The publication also touches on realistic goals for code coverage, aiming for maybe 60–70% rather than a perfect 100%, which can be really hard and maybe not the best use of time.
Right, practicality over perfection sometimes. Okay, the publication then shifts gears into Agile development, Scrum, and Kanban. These are household names in software now, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. Very common. Agile is presented as this approach that really focuses on developers and product owners working super closely together.
Better than the old way.
Well, it came about as a more flexible alternative to the traditional waterfall method. Waterfall is described briefly as that very linear process plan, everything up front in detail, then execute step by step.
Less room to change things later.
Exactly. Agile is built for change.
And the Agile Manifesto is sort of the founding document. What are its core ideas?
The publication highlights its main values. Valuing individuals and how they interact more than rigid processes. Getting working software out there over tons of documentation. Collaborating closely with the customer over strict contracts. And being able to respond to change rather than just sticking to the initial plan.
So flexibility, people, working product.
That's the essence, yeah.
And Scrum is one specific way to do Agile. How did they use it on this project?
Right. Scrum is a framework based on those Agile principles. Interestingly, the project started with a slightly modified version of Scrum.
Oh.
But later, as the team got bigger and they needed to coordinate more with other parts of the client's organization, it evolved into something called Scrum-Safe Scaled Agile Framework.
So they adapted it.
Yeah, and that's a really key point the publication makes. Companies almost always adapt Scrum. They tailor it to fit their needs, rather than following the manual word for word.
Let's put down Scrum then, the roles. Product owner, dev team, Scrum master.
Yep. The product owner owns the product backlog. That's the prioritized list of everything the product needs, features, fixes, etc.
Okay.
The development team is the group actually building the product. They're meant to be self-organizing, figuring out the best way to do the work.
And the Scrum master, is that like a project manager?
Not quite. The Scrum Master is more of a facilitator, a coach. They help the team use Scrum effectively, protect them from distractions, remove roadblocks. It's about guiding, not directing. The publication notes the hierarchy within the teams.
Got it. And the work happens in sprints, short cycles.
Exactly. Sprints are the heartbeat of Scrum. They're fixed-length iterations, usually 2 to 4 weeks. In this project, they use 2-week sprints.
And the point is?
To break down big, complex work into small, manageable chunks, it minimizes risk, lets you get feedback faster, and makes it easier to adapt if priorities change.
And within those sprints, you have these specific meetings or ceremonies?
Right. There's the daily Scrum, a quick 15-minute sync up for the dev team. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? Any blockers? Then backlog refinement, where the team and product owner look ahead, clarify upcoming work. Sprint planning is where they decide exactly what work to pull into the next sprint.
And showing the work.
That's the sprint review. They demonstrate what they completed to stakeholders, get feedback, and finally, the sprint retrospective.
What happens there?
That's crucial. The team looks back at the sprint. What went well, what didn't? What can we improve for next time? It's about continuous improvement. The publication also mentions using Kanban boards, physical or digital, like Trello or Jira, to visualize the workflow.
See where tasks are moving. And estimating the work for sprint planning, the publication mentions story points, Scrum poker.
Yeah, estimation is key to planning realistically. During sprint planning, you try to forecast what the team can actually achieve. Big tasks get broken down. The retrospective helps track velocity, how much work the team usually gets done, which informs future planning.
And Scrum poker helps estimate.
It's a technique often used in backlog refinement. Team members estimate the complexity of a task using story points, often using a Fibonacci-like sequence, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. Bigger number, more complex.
Why poker?
Because everyone picks their estimate card secretly, then reveals it at the same time. If there's a big difference, say one person says 3, another says 13, it sparks a discussion. Why the disagreement? It helps uncover assumptions and reach a shared understanding of the complexity.
Interesting way to handle estimates. So, stepping back, the core idea of Agile and Scrum is
It really boils down to focusing on people and collaboration, delivering working software frequently, rather than getting bogged down in rigid plans and contracts up front. It embraces the fact that requirements often evolve. Continuous collaboration, continuous delivery.
Okay, so that covers the on-site phase and the Agile framework. Then things changed. The project became distributed: Germany, Thailand, India. This is the start of the hybrid model, wasn't it? Triggered by, well, the obvious.
Yeah, exactly. After Almir's 4 weeks on-site, he initially went back to working remotely from Germany. But then, very quickly, the COVID-19 pandemic started escalating.
Right, early 2020.
Yep. There was a company-wide directive for German and Asia-based employees to return home. Apparently, there were some early cases reported in the client's Singapore office, which probably accelerated things.
So remote work got fast-tracked, even for clients who weren't keen before.
Pretty much forced their hand, yeah. The publication mentions a brief period, maybe late Feb to mid-March 2020, where there was some partial on-site work in Germany before the full national lockdown hit.
Yeah.
But that sudden shift to distributed work created a whole new set of collaboration challenges.
I bet. What were some of those initial difficulties working across locations like that?
Well, Almir mentions trying to join a daily scrum from the Abu Dhabi airport on his way back,
Oh, wow.
and just struggling to even recognize who was speaking because the Bangkok team was using a shared microphone in a room. Then back in Germany, the 6-hour time difference with Thailand was a big one. Meetings got pushed to awkward times.
Scheduling nightmare.
Totally. It really hammered home how crucial email and calendar tools are, especially making sure everyone has the time zone set correctly. Simple stuff, but vital.
And there was that brief return to an actual office in Germany, too. That sounded a bit chaotic.
Yeah, it was short-lived and seemed a bit makeshift. They needed daily badges, no assigned desks, just a shared study area in an office that was being reorganized.
Not ideal.
And apparently, the office was freezing. Even getting lunch was complicated because they didn't have permanent badges for the cafeteria payment system. Just illustrates those little practical frictions of a rapidly changing setup.
And coordinating meetings across Germany, Thailand, and India. How did they even manage the time zones?
It was definitely a puzzle. They had to shift meeting times to try and accommodate Bangkok, which often meant afternoon dailies in Germany. That, in turn, impacted the team in Pune, India, who were an hour and a half behind Thailand. Finding those overlapping windows where everyone could actually talk in real time was key. They ended up focusing synchronous communication around like 12.30 Central European Time.
Okay.
One small upside of being in the German office briefly was those informal German chats during breaks. But mostly, it was a complex balancing act.
Language also plays a role, doesn't it? The publication touches on that.
It does. Almir notes how important his German skills were professionally in Germany, for visas, recognition, etc. He contrasts that with Thai, where, in the Bangkok office environment with limited outside interaction, the immediate need felt less pressing. Though he did use translation apps on a weekend trek.
Right. And the tech for connecting these three locations, meeting rooms.
Yeah, they had equipped meeting rooms with screens, dynamic cameras that tried to focus on whoever was speaking, central microphones.
High tech, but did it work perfectly?
Not always. The publication mentions benefits, like the cameras adjusting, but also challenges. Audio clarity could be tough in crowded rooms. People might talk over each other unintentionally, but they adapted over time.
And they still used physical tools sometimes. Post-its.
Yeah, a blend. Sometimes brainstorming on whiteboards or Post-its, but then making sure it got documented digitally afterwards. And even in the hybrid model, being physically present in one location still had advantages for quick local requests.
Okay, so hybrid was complex. Then came the next big shift, Total home office, everyone remote.
Exactly. Following the German national lockdown around March 16, 2020, which coincidentally was right when Almir's daughter was born, so he went on parental leave.
Talk about timing.
Right. Prevent the entire project team was suddenly working from home. Completely unprecedented for them. Almir mentions having to move his own home workspace from a bedroom to the living room. A lot of adjustment needed, personally and professionally.
How did collaboration change when everyone was remote? Any initial hiccups?
Oh, yeah. Latency in online meetings was an issue at first, and that's when virtual backgrounds and tools like Cisco WebEx really took off. The publication muses a bit about the tech behind it, motion capture, AI.
The green screen effect without the green screen?
Exactly. But interestingly, over time, people started turning their webcams off more often.
Why do you think that was? Bandwidth? Fatigue?
Could be a mix. Bandwidth issues, maybe Zoom fatigue, or just people preferring voice only sometimes. More reliance on just hearing each other.
So how did they tackle those early technical problems, like the latency?
They were proactive. The team actually decided together to shift their main daily meeting much earlier to 7 mid-Euro AM Central European Time.
7 a.m., wow. Why so early?
The thinking was it might improve audio quality before network traffic really picked up and maybe help people focus better at the start of the day. And that early start time stuck until mid-July when things stabilized more. Shows their adaptability.
Definitely. The publication also makes that interesting point comparing internet infrastructure across the countries.
Yeah, it's quite relevant for remote work. Almir contrasts Germany's internet, which sometimes gets criticized for being a bit slow or bureaucratic upgrade, with his experience in Thailand, where getting a really good, affordable, unlimited mobile data SIM was surprisingly easy. He even throws in a comment about Italy's mobile data back when he first moved to Germany.
And the point is,
Just highlighting these significant global differences, your remote work capability can really depend on the infrastructure where your team members are located. He even mentions unreliable electricity being an issue for some colleagues in more rural parts, another potential home office hurdle.
right, things you don't think about in a central office. But despite those variations, the team did find ways to collaborate effectively remotely.
They absolutely did. That earlier meeting time actually gave them a longer window for overlapping work, and new communication patterns emerged.
Like what?
Informal team calls just for quick questions became common. The front-end developers started having their own weekly meeting to tackle shared problems and improve their coding guidelines and documentation.
So self-organizing solutions.
Exactly. And to keep the social connection going, they introduced bi-weekly get-togethers, just informal virtual hangouts.
Nice. What about bringing new people onto the team remotely?
Onboarding had to adapt too. More focus on structured KT sessions, sometimes led by testers giving an overview of the application. And they started recording some sessions so new hires could watch them later. The publication links this to Tim Ferriss's idea of automating repeatable tasks, like reusing code, but for knowledge sharing.
Smart. Okay, so looking back at that total home office period, what were the main pros and cons highlighted?
A key advantage mentioned was actually that everyone being remote leveled the playing field in meetings. No more hybrid situation with some people in a room and some dialing in. It often led to better focus, maybe better audio quality too, especially as people started using noise-canceling headphones or wireless ones for more freedom.
Okay, that makes sense. Equal footing.
But on the flip side, Almir shares his personal challenge of suddenly working from the living room and the impact on family life. That was a very relatable struggle for many people forced into remote work without a dedicated space. The publication flags that broader issue. Lots of people just didn't have comfortable or suitable home office setups ready.
Yeah, a huge societal shift happened almost overnight. So let's try and wrap this up. It's been a really detailed look through Almir Mahmudski's publication, Globalization in Software. We've compared Onsite in Bangkok, the complexities of that hybrid Germany, Thailand, India setup, and then the sudden shift to fully remote work.
Yeah, and all through the lens of Agile and Scrum in a real-world global project.
It's fascinating how these different models affected everything, not just the technical work, but team dynamics, communication, culture.
Absolutely. And I think Almir's experiences really drive home how crucial flexibility, clear communication, and using technology smartly are for any global team, regardless of whether they're on-site, hybrid, or remote. Those fundamentals are key.
So here's something for you, our listeners, to think about. How do the lessons learned here about adapting to change, finding communication strategies that bridge distance, using tech effectively apply to your own work? Even if you're not in software, how is the future of work changing in your field based on these principles.
That's a great takeaway. These ideas about collaborating effectively when we're not all in the same room are becoming relevant for almost everyone, aren't they?
They really are. Now, if this deep dive sparked your interest and you want to explore related topics on global teams or remote work,
Click on the link tab topic. We think you'll find it really valuable.
and of course, if you want to keep up with our explorations into how work and technology are transforming,
Subscribe and stay connected.